Go restream chat. Hey guys, how's it going? First, 5,000 pine points to proper FTPV for being first. Face not in the text anymore. That's locked. Lock that. Sound working? Everything working? Everybody can hear me fine? Is everything working? Testing that. Yeah, so. 8 trillion, proper FPV. How's it going? You guys can hear me, right? Cool. No, they should not be jump bucks. I'm stealing Pine Creek's money. This is what is it China's doing? The currency inflation, where we're inflating his currency to devaluate the Pine Creek bucks. All right, so today we're going to be new format, trying to do a response video, live response video of capturing Christianity. Cameron not understanding the puddle analogy. Haven't actually watched the video yet, but we're gonna go through it together. So let's do this. God damn it.
Hey everyone, I'm Cameron Bertuzzi. Welcome to the channel. In this video, I'm explaining why the puddle analogy fails against the fine-tuning argument.
That's great. We're going to find out.
If you want to learn more about apologetics, the productive conversations between Christians and non-Christians, and learn about arguments for God that you didn't even know existed, then make sure to subscribe to my channel and turn on the little bell so you don't miss any new videos. So before we actually get into the puddle analogy, let's get clear on what the fine-tuning argument for God is. It's actually one of my favorite arguments. Well, actually, my favorite argument is the argument from all of the arguments, but this one,
the argument from all the arguments is really stupid. Like, it's incredibly stupid. Like, literally in the paper, it says, if we assume all of these other arguments work, evidence for God. And that's the primary source of the evidence. It's such a stupid argument.
Is really good. A lot of atheists will even admit that the fine-tuning argument is the best argument that theists have.
The teleological argument from fine-tuning, I'm very happy to admit right off the bat, this is the best argument that the theists have when it comes to cosmology.
At some point, certainly, we all asked, well, which is...
He stopped that quote from Sean Carroll. He stopped it early. Right at the end of the quote, it says, it's still a terrible argument. A terrible argument. We got to find that quote. We got to find that real quick. So, Sean Carroll versus William Lane Craig debate. Damn it. Carroll. Damn you, dyslexia typing skills. Got it. All right, and then open transcript. There's no transcript option. Put it on my channel because I don't have a clip on there. Sweet. Mine. Content. Videos. Search. Ontological search. Most perplexing. Pause. Open transcript. Control F. Terrible. God damn it. Oh, that wasn't the ontological argument, it was the cosmological. Oh, it was my response to Braxton. I put that in there. Braxton one, didn't I? Braxton. Open transcript. Terrible. Terrible. Got it. All right. So let's go back to the Capturing Christianity quote here.
A lot of atheists will even admit that the fine-tuning argument is the best argument that theists have.
The teleological argument from fine-tuning, I'm very happy to admit right off the bat, this is the best argument that the theists have when it comes to cosmology.
You cut that off. You cut that off right there. Like, all right, it's an interesting point to cut off.
Phenomena, you have parameters of particle physics and cosmology, and then you have two different models, theism and naturalism, and you want to compare which model is the best fit for the data. I applaud that general approach. Given that, it is still a terrible argument.
It seems that for any worldview that includes...
Yeah, that was good. I think, wait, that should have started earlier, right? Here it is. Here it is.
This is the best argument that the theists have when it comes to cosmology. That's because it plays by the rules. You have phenomena, you have parameters of particle physics and cosmology, and then you have two different models, theism and naturalism, and you want to compare which model is the best fit for the data. I applaud that general approach. Given that, it is still a terrible argument.
Terrible argument.
At some point, certainly, we're all asked, well, which is the best argument you've yet come up against from the other side? And I think every one of us picks the fine-tuning one as the most intriguing.
The Goldilocks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Fine-tuning the 1 degree, well, one hair different, nothing.
So what I'm going to do in this video, first is I'm going to explain the best version, or at least my favorite version, of the fine-tuning argument. Second,
It's the one that doesn't indicate a god. That's the best version.
going to take a very close look at the Puddle analogy to the fine-tuning argument. And actually, we're going to be looking at 5 different interpretations of the Puddle analogy.
Wow.
And then the last thing we're going to do is look at some responses to these different interpretations. All right, so first, this is the version of the fine-tuning argument that I like the best. Premise 1, the probability that our universe would be life-permitting given naturalism is very, very low.
The fuck? Where did you come up with this number? You're dumb. This is stupid. Like, this assumes that there is no guiding principle in naturalism that would produce a life-permitting universe. Like, why do you assume that? That's dumb. Like, you could just add in your own new law of nature that says, yes, actually, it would produce a life-permitting universe, and then under this version of naturalism, poof, it's now extremely high. Could be necessary, even. It's a necessary result. So this entire first premise is just obviously false, because it's dividing the different probability space in 2 ways. It's saying that if we have naturalism with no constraints, no predetermined way that the universe could be, we're just saying it could just be any logically possible way, then given the fact that it could be any logically possible way, the probability of making a life-permitting universe is very low. But then you contrast that, well, that's probably premise 2, where he says, but it's not really high under God, right? Let's see. Really high under God. That's going to be the
Premise
next
2,
one.
the probability that our universe would be life-permitting given theism is not very, very low.
Yep, stupid number 2. So the stupid number 2 is that it's contrasting the probability space between naturalism with no constraints, no constraining factors that make one way the universe could be more likely than another, and then contrasting that to a theistic one where there is a God who would specifically create a life-permitting universe. Like, obviously, if you cherry pick and then you make it so it seems like it's more likely under theism, when you're actually just picking one that has more constraints, which just when you compare them equally, there's no difference. So, like, for example, for each different possible way the universe could be in the first premise, there could be a God who could want that universe, which means the probability for a God and the probability of universes producing a life-permitting universe is exactly the same. There is no difference probabilistically one way or the other. Given 2, it's only more probable if you imagine a God who's like personal, which is theism, so that's fair, as opposed to like a deistic God who doesn't care about you. If you have a God that cares about you and wants you to live, or people to live, then obviously it's more likely that if there's a God who wants people, there will be a universe with people. But you can just do the same thing with naturalism. You can say, in naturalism, we have this new law, like naturalistic pantheism, let's take it that way, in which it wants or has some necessary proclivity to make a life-permitting universe. Now, in naturalistic pantheism, the probability that our universe will be life-permitting is extremely high, higher than theism. So this same argument, the fine-tuning argument, can be used against a God to indicate naturalism, because it's all predicated on this assumption of what you think the creator, or whatever the fundamental nature of reality is itself like. Is it one that would choose to prioritize a life-permitting universe? If so, well then guess what? You assume God or assume naturalistic pantheism and assume it has the nature to make a universe that's life-permitting. Then poof, guess what? The universe being life-permitting is very, very high. None of this is evidence. This is all just starting with your conclusion and working backwards. Very stupid argument.
So it follows the fact that our universe is life-permitting provides evidence for theism over naturalism.
No, it doesn't. This is stupid. So like if you have gold, let's say there's gold in somebody's house. I forget who I used this against. I think it was Jonathan McClatchy. I think I used this analogy. He said, if there's gold in somebody's house and we don't have any explanation of gold, we don't know, like imagine we're like a 5-year-old kid, we don't know what gold is. And all we know is that there is this story on a TV show, like that leprechauns like gold and they make gold and they just magically poof it out of nothing. Ex nihilo. They poof gold out of the thin air. And you see gold in your friend's house, well then under this really dumb theistic reasoning, that's evidence for leprechauns. This is evidence for leprechauns over the fact that we have a no natural explanation of gold. Is that actually evidence for leprechauns? No, obviously not. The fact that you can make up an explanation and say, I've made up something that could explain how this is here, isn't evidence that's true. That's still just your imaginary hypothesis. And there's infinitely many imaginary hypotheses that don't entail your assumptions of a being, a leprechaun or a god. You don't need that. So it's stupid to think that, you can imagine a way to explain this, therefore that's evidence. Like, nope, completely flawed theistic thinking. That's fundamentally wrong with their ideology, is that they think that, I can say God could make this, we see this, therefore God. Just post hoc ergo propter hoc. Straight up fallacy.
So for any logic or like probability geeks out there, the third premise in this argument follows from the first two premises from something called the likelihood principle. If you want to learn more about the likelihood principle, check the description for more details. Now, if you're not familiar with this particular version of the fine-tuning argument, then make sure to check
essentially what I just said. Post hoc ergo propter hoc. Likelihood principle is post hoc ergo propter hoc.
The description. I've linked exactly where I got it from. And by the way, But
just to clarify, it's not, the likelihood principle isn't a problem, but it only applies to things that have an empirical basis. So like if you said there's a footprint in the snow, is it a horse or a zebra? Likelihood principle would be like, it's a horse. But is it a horse or a unicorn? Or if it's like, if we don't know of horses, would it be more likely to be a unicorn? No. The fact that you imagine unicorns to exist doesn't make unicorns the more likely explanation just because you can imagine it. You'd have to actually have some evidence that unicorns exist before it even applies. So if there's no empirical evidence, it doesn't apply at all.
I should mention that I'll be pointing you to the description of this video a lot, so just make sure to check it out at some point. Now, before we actually get into the puddle analogy, let me go ahead and give you a quick defense of both premises in my argument. So the fact that our universe permits the evolution of embodied conscious creatures is actually pretty puzzling. Imagine for a moment that there was no such thing as gravity. Do you think that people like us, or any creatures at all, could evolve in such a universe? The answer is no.
Wait, what? Where did you come to that conclusion? Like, that's so dumb. Like, again, this is the fundamental fallacy in what theists are doing here, is that they're saying that if we take away gravity and assume all of the other laws of physics are the same, and there's literally nothing else there, then would we evolve? And then no, sure, like if we knew literally every law of physics and we started messing with the laws of physics, we'd see drastic changes. But guess what? We don't. So that means if you changed the law of gravity, it could be replaced by a different law that has similar effects, or if you change one law, they could all be proportionally shifted to others, or they could all be intertwined in like the grand unification theory. So all of the forces and laws are themselves contingent on the others, and they are all necessary. So any of these could be could be reasonable explanations of why there could be life without gravity. Not a problem. Replace gravity with a different law. Replace all the laws with a different law. Replace things that aren't affected by these laws. Not a problem. The fact that he's assuming that once you take away gravity, well then nothing can form, is just based on the assumption that all physics we have now is the only physics, and if we just assume that's the only physics and we remove it, then life isn't possible. Sure, but that's irrelevant. Like, it doesn't matter that this is the only physics we know of. There could definitely be more stuff, more kinds of life that could evolve from other laws out there that we don't know about yet. So the point of his argument here is that because we require gravity, and we require gravity to be a particular number, and if you change it, then life is less likely. That means it's very unlikely given the random, unguided space of possibilities given naturalism. Again, this is just his assumption that it could just be any way, and there's no likelihood difference between the different ways nature could be. But again, we could just add a guiding principle, say all laws are determined by some super law, then poof, you can't do that anymore. Now the probability under this one is as higher than theism. So again, he's just explaining his fallacious reasoning for the first principle of taking an unlimited range of possibilities in naturalism and contrasting that to a very specific range of possibilities of his imagined kinds of a God. And if you just add in a very specific kind of a law in naturalism, and just it refutes everything he just said, and you can have equal probability between naturalism and theism.
Wouldn't even be planets. Matter would just kind of be floating around everywhere. There'd be no stars, no atmospheres, nothing at all resembling what we see here in our universe. No
Only if there's no other laws that could replace gravity.
part of our universe would be dense enough to be in the solid phase of matter, so nothing in our universe could be a kind of information storing device. Life needs gravity.
No, information can exist without gravity. That's perfectly fine. Quantum mechanics does that without gravity.
But we can't just have gravity. We gotta have gravity at the right strength. If the gravitational constant in Newton's equation was any larger, then the universe would have just sort of collapsed back in on itself almost immediately after the Big Bang. And if the constant were any weaker, then matter never would have coalesced into planets or stars or anything like we see in our universe. It would have just sort of all expanded into nothingness. So not only do we need a universal attractive force like gravity, it has to be set at the exact right strength. Physicists have estimated that the gravitational constant is fine-tuned to 60 decimal places. Any deviation on either side of that.
Why have faith in laws you don't know of? You don't need to. That's not the point. The point here is that the numbers theists are using are wrong. They're objectively wrong. They're contrasting the possibility of any possible kind of a universe and just the kind of a God who would create life. Those are not fair comparisons. That's like comparing every possible flower to just comparing one type of tree. Like, that's not a fair comparison. Not every kind of flower has pink petals. But if you compare that to every kind of sakura blossom, which has mostly pink petals, well, then it's more likely that the trees will have pink petals because you're only comparing it to one kind of tree. So if you're comparing every kind of flower to one kind of tree, it's not a fair comparison. What you need to do is compare either every kind of flower to every kind of tree, or one kind of flower to one kind of tree. What the theists are doing is a misrepresentation because they're comparing every kind of flower to one kind of tree. But in naturalism, you could have very specific kinds of universes that have guiding principles, just like God does. He has some moral nature that makes him want to make living beings. We can have a law of nature that makes the universe produce the constants that we see. And so either way, once you compare it to a one-to-one correlation of this kind of flower to this kind of tree, you get the same probabilities. But the fundamental flaw in Cameron's silly argument is that he's comparing every kind of flower, which is any possible kind of universe with no guiding principle, to one kind of tree, which is just his God, with this predetermined desire to make life-permitting things. And to make it fair, you would have to say, okay, so there's this natural kind of universe that have this predetermined force to make a life-permitting universe, compared to a God who has a predetermined force to make a life-permitting universe. What are the probabilities? Well, naturalism would win, but it's about the same. So those aren't too bad. It's even, 1-to-1. Or you could compare every kind of universe and every kind of a God, and again, you get the same probabilities, 1-to-1. For each possible kind of a universe, there could be a possible God who would want to create that universe. They are 1-to-1 correlations. So there's no probability difference in this case. It actually would be better for naturalism. But again, no difference. So you don't need faith here. The point here is that you can demonstrate the theistic math is bad. They don't understand the topic.
That would result in a lifeless universe. Now, gravity is just one relatively easy to understand example. If you want to see a longer discussion about all the evidence for fine-tuning,
am I an advocate for the multiverse theory? Like, not exactly. Like, I don't mind it, but I don't adopt it.
check out the description. I've linked there another conversation I had with an actual cosmologist about all the evidence for fine-tuning. So the question for us is, given that
so I've debunked all of the evidence for fine-tuning. You can check my conversation with, actually I should just pull it up. Derp, with one of the leading experts in the world on fine-tuning, Robin Collins, TJump. And I specifically asked him, like, is anything in physics evidence of design? And he said, no. It's only the physics plus a philosophical argument. You need to add in like morality or some defining feature of God to make him have a reason to commit or to design this kind of a universe that's life permitting over others. If you don't have that, then just saying that there is a designer doesn't tell you anything. It's irrelevant.
It's fair to say that if you don't include the philosophical argument and you just go based off of the physics, like combinations of principles, particles, laws in the field of physics, that doesn't support design at all. It is only supported when you add the philosophical argument of like morality to the physics.
Yeah, that's true. I don't think the fine-tuning supports a generic design hypothesis. They're just some designer. I think if you just say some designer, that gives you no reason to think the designer would produce this kind of universes versus all others. Just like any improbable event, if you allow that, then any improbable event you could have supporting a design hypothesis. So no, I don't think that will work. I think you have to have a reason that's somehow out of the and not just simply ascribed to the nature, that comes out of something deeper in the nature of your postulate.
Exactly. So if you just say there is something in the nature of the multiverse or the universe or whatever hypothesis you want to use that makes it more likely to make this kind of universe, then under that hypothesis, this universe would be more likely, which is exactly what the theists are doing. They're just ascribing a property to God's nature, his moral nature, which would make him more likely to be this kind of a universe as opposed to another, and asserting that that means theism is more likely because they've made up this hypothetical imaginary property that they think is in a God. And with this property, he's more likely to make a life-permitting universe. Well, guess what? We can make up a property and add it to the multiverse or any universe naturalistic pantheism model. And guess what? We get the same result. The problem is that there's no evidence of this. You can't say morality is inherently in God's nature because it's just something you've made up. There's no evidence of it. The best evidence right now is that morality is subjective. We have no evidence that morality is objective at all. It's just a hypothesis. So you can't say that, morality is objective and it must be in the nature of the fundamental reality because there's no evidence to support that. It's just something you've made up.
The universe didn't have to be this way. Why is it this way? Why does it support life? What's the explanation? On naturalism, the view that nothing like God exists, it's actually pretty surprising that life would exist. And that's because
unless there's a law guiding it, causing it to make the exact life-permitting principles we have, then it wouldn't be surprising at all. Wow.
Are just vastly more ways to get a universe that can't permit life than
unless there's a guiding principle that completely contradicts everything he said.
To get a universe that can permit life. It's therefore very, 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 very improbable that life would exist given naturalism. Now, there's a lot more to say here, but this is just a very quick defense of my first premise. Now,
which has been easily proven false.
On the other hand, life is not so improbable on theism. God has a particular reason to create us because we are embodied moral agents. We basically have the ability to make moral choices. We can choose between right and wrong. We have the
yes. TJump, I thought you held the position that morality is objective. Yes, Mike, I do hold the position that morality is objective, but it's a hypothesis. We don't have any proof that morality is objective. Like, I can't demonstrate it in a lab. I can't prove it like scientifically. So it's not something that we can demonstrate, or I would have won a Nobel Prize if I had done that. So it's just a hypothesis right now. We can't demonstrate objective morality. Therefore, the best evidence we have is morality is a product of evolution, purely subjective. That's the best evidence we have for the time being, even though I accept objective morality.
The ability to harm people, but we can also use our freedom in order to do good things and exemplify goods like compassion, love, forgiveness, and that type of thing. So it's not incredibly surprising that God would have reason or would want to create a universe that can support embodied conscious creatures like us that have the ability to make moral choices.
So in other words, Cameron made up a property. He ascribed it to his God, and he said, if God has this made up property, then he has a reason to make a life-bringing universe. Wow, ta-da, yay. I want that little like clip. What's the shoe on head clip of? I don't think I have it anymore, but the little yay, kids yay sound effect. Kids yay. That one. Yep. Okay. So, yes, need to save that. So, Cameron ascribed a magical property to his God that then explains that we created the universe as it is. Woohoo! And we can do the same thing with the universe. So we have the exact same probability. Yay!
So even though universes that can't permit life vastly outnumber universes that can permit life, it's not so unlikely or so unexpected.
Yes, I read Harry Potter.
That God would want to choose and select a universe that can permit life. That's a quick defensive premise too. So think of it
also easily refuted.
Like this. Here's an analogy. There's billions and trillions of ways to combine different chunks of metal and plastic.
And there's billions and trillions of ways a God could be. It could be a God who likes unicorns, or a God who likes pixies, or a God who likes black holes, or hydrogen atoms, or any combinations of those things. Or a God who doesn't like Cameron's hair because it's very silly. Any of those are possible gods. The only difference here is that what Cameron thinks is that there's only one kind of God, one that he has presupposed with circular reasoning, that only my favorite Sky Daddy is the only real one and no combinations of anything else can count. Therefore, Sky Daddy more likely than naturalism. Woohoo. We can just use the same reasoning, the same circular reasoning to say naturalism, naturalistic pantheism is the only kind of naturalism. And in naturalistic pantheism, there is this law called the Gablooga law, which makes all of the laws of physics intertwined to make a life-permitting universe necessary. Oh my God. Now we have a view of naturalism that life is more likely than theism. Haha.
It's certainly possible to organize these materials into a Ferrari, but just sort of like throwing them together by chance, you're probably not going to get anything that resembles a car.
No, Ray Vaughn. Shitting on your opponent does not cause you to lose. That is a fallacy. Even if you say like they're dumb or something, that doesn't prove that your argument is wrong or that your position is wrong. So shitting on your opponent doesn't mean you lose. You can shit on your opponent and win. Hitchens did this all the time.
Much less a Ferrari or sports car. To get a Ferrari, you need someone to intentionally select what to make out of all the possible combinations. And by the way, this is what a good analogy looks like. So from the first two premises of my argument, it follows that a life-permitting thing that resembles a car, much less a Ferrari or sports car. To get a Ferrari, you need someone to intentionally select what to make out of all the possible combinations. And by the way, this is what a good analogy looks like.
Oh, the watchmaker argument is a good analogy that was debunked in like 5 years. Like, no, this is not a good analogy. Ferrari, not analogous to universe. That'd be like saying that a bunch of dice is analogous to a Ferrari. This is a completely failed analogy. Cameron, like most Christians, just doesn't understand physics. Surprise.
So from the first two premises of my argument, it follows that a life-permitting universe provides pretty good evidence for theism over naturalism.
Nope. Refuted this so many times, so easily. It's just you comparing all kinds of flowers to one kind of tree is not a fair comparison. You either have to compare all kinds of trees to all kinds of flowers, or one kind of flower to one kind of tree. And in this case, the flowers and trees are God and naturalism. Just comparing the general group of naturalism, of all possible kinds of naturalism, to the one particular imagined fairy sky daddy that you have, not a fair comparison. It's cherry picking.
That's the fine-tuning argument, my favorite version of the fine-tuning argument in a nutshell. Right, so now let's turn to the puddle analogy and get clear, first of all, on exactly what it is, what it's supposed to be saying. The puddle analogy was made famous by...
Why would you demand good evidence? Cloud, were you not watching like 5 minutes ago when I just said there's no evidence of objective morality? It's just a hypothesis. Like, rewind the video.
An English author named Douglas Adams. He's actually the author of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Now, I haven't read the book. I hear it's really good, but I actually really like the movie. He's obviously a very, very talented writer, and he just seems like a really brilliant guy. So here's a clip of him actually giving the analogy.
And it's rather like a puddle waking up one morning. I know they don't normally do this, but allow me, I'm a science fiction writer. A puddle wakes up one morning and thinks, this is a very interesting world I find myself in. It fits me very neatly. In fact, it fits me so neatly, I mean, really precise, isn't it? It must have been made to have me in it. And the sun rises and is continuing to narrate the story about this hole being made to have him in it. And the sun rises and gradually the puddle is shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. And by the time the puddle ceases to exist, it's still thinking, it's still trapped in this idea that the hole was there for it. And if we think the world is here for us, we will continue to destroy it in the way that we've been destroying it.
Now, it seems to me that Adam's original point is something like this. As our environment gets worse and worse and worse, or in other words, as the puddle continues to shrink, then we don't really care, everything's okay because it was designed for us. What's unique about this interpretation is that atheists are very rarely using the puddle analogy as a reason to care about the environment. But that seems to be exactly what Adams was getting at, right? He's talking about a puddle getting smaller and smaller. So call this interpretation 1, environmentalism. A second, more popular interpretation of the puddle analogy is that just because something appears designed to you doesn't mean that it's actually designed. Call this interpretation 2, appearances can be deceiving. This is the interpretation that Drew, over at Genetically Modified Skeptic, seems to endorse in the following clip.
The analogy directly acknowledges that the universe appears designed, and it poses an explanation for why that appearance is deceiving. The analogy just shifts perspectives, presenting the possibility that the universe existed first and that we, in our evolution, came to exist as a creature which fits its pre-existing environment.
Now here, Drew...
So these are the same thing. I don't know why he split this up into two different analogies. The whole point Douglas Adams is making is that the universe is killing us. We are dying. It kills us all the time. Saying that this place was designed for us is like saying a death trap was designed for a mouse. Like, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Or I guess technically a death trap was designed for a mouse, if you're like a mouse trap or whatever. So saying you were born into a place that's literally designed to kill you, maybe it's an evil god who designed it, that would be a better argument. And then as it's killing you, you keep saying, oh, it's a wonderful place. It was designed for me by this all-loving God, is stupid. So the point Douglas Adams is making here is actually a combination of both of those, the environmental position as well as the anti-God position. He's specifically stating that we are in an environment that is killing us, like in the puddle, which evaporates a piece at a time. Most of space, most of the world, most of everywhere is detrimental to humans. And so saying that this place was designed for us is insane. You're saying that, oh, well, it's so improbable that the laws of physics could produce anything life-permitting, but if a God is powerful enough to design all of those laws of physics, he could have tweaked them a bit more to make most of the universe life-permitting rather than just this tiny little speck where we're dying all the time. So Douglas Adams' argument is actually more in-depth because it's addressing both of those things that you call two separate interpretations.
Drew actually admits that the analogy acknowledges that the universe appears designed, but appearances can be deceiving. For Drew, the puddle analogy is meant to get us to consider the possibility that we were shaped to live in our environment, rather than the other way around, rather the environment being created for us.
Oh, Abu Hizab, I recognize that. That is the little, that's how, what's it was called? Pulsars were discovered. They had a big line with a bunch of graphs and their little bump on the graph, and pulsars were discovered by one of the first women cosmologists who didn't win the Nobel Prize. Her male companion did. So that line graph is the line graph used to discover pulsars.
A third interpretation of the puddle analogy is that it's really like arrogance or self-centeredness that makes us conclude or infer that the universe was designed for us.
Anthropocentricness. Yes, that is correct.
The world is just so beautiful. I'm just so amazing. I'm so arrogant, and the world must have been designed for me.
Ah, that's exactly the exact representation of the Christian argument. Yes, correct.
Arrogance, self-centeredness prevents us from considering the possibility that the universe wasn't created especially for us.
Yep.
Call this interpretation 3, arrogantly designed. A fourth interpretation of the analogy is that life was shaped by the conditions of our universe, but different life might emerge in universes with different conditions. Just as puddles take the shape of their container, life takes the shape of its environment. Call this interpretation 4, different universe, different life. A fifth interpretation of the puddle analogy is that just like the puddle could only observe the shape that it takes, life can only observe a life-permitting universe. If the universe couldn't permit life, then obviously we wouldn't be here thinking about it, talking about it. Our
Anthropic principle?
observations, in other words, necessitate a life-permitting universe. The puddle shouldn't be drawing conclusions about why it takes the shape that it does. It has to take that shape. Likewise, life shouldn't be asking, why does the universe have life? It has to have life. Call this interpretation 5, life is necessary. Now, let's just sort of take note of what's happened so far. We've looked at 5 different interpretations of the puddle analogy. 5. That's not a good sign. And
What, do you not understand how language works? Like, technically, those are all a part of the same argument. The fact that you can interpret them as separate arguments just means that you're silly. This is not a problem with the argument. That's 5 ways your position is stupid. That's because your position is really, really stupid. And so there's lots of ways it fails, which can all be instantiated by one simple analogy. It's actually not a good sign for your position. It's not a problem with the analogy. It just shows the analogy is that good that there are that many problems with your position.
analogies are not supposed to be ambiguous. They're supposed to be clear and obvious.
What? Like, analogies aren't supposed to be ambiguous? Have you never heard of the natural ambiguity of language? All words are ambiguous. Like, you just listed 5 amazing ways that analogy is a corollary to your religious position, seeing the universe as designed. So it's not ambiguous. It connects to many of the flaws in your position. 5 of them that you just listed. This is amazing. If an analogy can be a corollary in multiple ways to express the point that it's trying to get across, that makes it an extremely good analogy, not a bad analogy. Like, you've got it backwards, Cameron. You don't understand how analogies work.
I mean, that's why we use analogies. They're supposed to make a very, very clear point. But the true point of the puddle analogy is elusive. No one, like literally no one, not even the atheists that I've asked about this, can agree on what the point of the puddle analogy is. And
the point is literally that the God comparison is dumb. That is the point. Fine-tuning to God is dumb. That is the point. And it's done for many, many reasons. And all those reasons you listed are some of the reasons that it's dumb. But I'm pretty sure all the theists would agree. Fine-tuning to God is dumb, is the point of the analogy.
Prediction is that even though I've tried to be literally as charitable as possible in addressing the puddle analogy, I'm still going to get people telling me that I just don't understand it. I haven't
He doesn't understand it.
considered this other interpretation of the puddle analogy. This is not a good
Possible.
sign. If no one can understand the point that you're trying to make, maybe you don't really understand the point that you're trying to make.
Bible interpretations. If you want to know what's wrong with the First Baptist Church, go to the Second Baptist Church. If you want to know what's wrong with them, go to the Jesuits. If you want to know what's wrong with them, go to the Evangelicals. If there's ambiguity in the text, well, clearly the writer has no idea what he's talking about. Mishka Daddy.
So 2 more quick points here is that the puddle analogy is probably not something that people have analyzed at this depth. So hearing me analyze it and draw out different interpretations is probably going to seem at odds with their intuitions about it. That's fine. This level of
Hey, Merrick, how's it going?
analysis is meant to do that. It's meant to draw out the reasoning explicitly so that we can take a closer look at it. That's sort of what analytical
Quantum lol.
philosophy is all about. The second point is that a lot of people will want to combine different interpretations of the puddle analogy, and that's also fine. Like, if you think that interpretations 3, 4, and 5 are the main point of the analogy, that's okay. I've just split the reasoning out so that we can all see it explicitly. All right, so now let's analyze these 5 different interpretations and see what can be said about them. The first interpretation of the analogy is that thinking we're designed makes us care less about the environment. As the puddle gets smaller and smaller, or another
I don't think that's a point of the analogy. It's not like its goal is to make us environmentally friendly. It's more that if our universe was designed for us, why does the universe want to kill us so badly? Not about us being environmentally friendly.
In other words, as the environment gets worse and worse, we don't really care because ultimately we still think that the universe was designed for us. First, let's quickly note that this is not an objection to the fine-tuning argument or the argument from design. That's
obviously that wasn't like the point. Douglas Adams' point was explicitly, guess what? If this was designed for us and it's constantly killing us, those seem to be contradictory statements. So the environmentalism thing is more about how the environment that is designed for us is also killing us.
That's not the point. He's not saying the universe wasn't designed for us. Rather, what he's saying is that design makes us care less about the environment. It's a kind of moral critique. Now, keeping that distinction in mind, I think he's actually right. Thinking that the universe was designed can lead to carelessness. Some sects of Christians, and I hate to admit this, a lot of Christians think that they don't really need to care about the environment because the second coming of Christ is going to be here and he's going to fix everything. Now, I think theologically, this is a complete mistake. That God designed the universe for us doesn't mean that we shouldn't take care of it. I think the opposite is actually implied. And if I can talk about Christianity in particular for a second, the Bible actually teaches the opposite. Genesis 1 explains that humans are held accountable as stewards over the earth. Psalm 24 says that the earth is the Lord's. Numbers 35 instructs us to keep the land pure and to not pollute it. Revelation 11 says that God will punish the destroyers of the earth.
Like flooding the Nile with blood, or causing destructions of cities, or earthquakes, or covering the entire world with water. Like, man, if he's going to punish the destroyers of the earth, he's going to have to start slapping himself pretty hard.
Corinthians 6 says that our bodies are temples and should therefore be taken care of. Now, if I was tasked as like a steward over someone's house, obviously I'd be held responsible if I completely trashed it out and like lit it on fire. And so likewise, as stewards over God's creation, I think that we have a responsibility to take care of it and make sure that it's healthy. Another point here is that belief in naturalism doesn't automatically make one an environmentalist. We can imagine a naturalist sort of understanding that the heat death of the universe implies that humans are eventually going to die out, and therefore he would just sort of not care about what happens. Whether I take care of the environment now or I don't, like everything is going to die one day, so why do all this extra work? Now, I'm not saying that this is the right mindset, nor am I saying that this is even a rational mindset. I'm just pointing out that in the same way that a theist can reason that design implies we don't have to care about environment, naturalism can imply that we shouldn't care about the environment. My major point in response to interpretation 1 is that this is not an objection to the fine-tuning argument. It was never designed to be that way, pun intended. It's completely unrelated, so let's move on. All right, so the second interpretation is that just because something looks designed doesn't mean that it is designed. Now, I know this is going to shock a lot of atheists out there, but I agree. Just because something looks designed doesn't mean that it is designed. But it also doesn't mean that it isn't designed. Have you ever heard of an artificial lake? Have you ever seen a pool? Have you ever seen a coffee mug? Have you ever seen a water beaker? Some bodies of water are designed to be the exact dimensions that they are. The appearance of design can go wrong, but it can also go right. So then how do we know, how do we tell if something is designed or not? Well, this interpretation of the Puddle analogy
We find the designer. If we don't see a designer, we probably don't know what's designed.
Isn't going to answer that question. It can't tell us if something is designed or not. All it says is that appearances can be deceiving. I mean, okay, but we're sort of still left wondering whether or not the body of water in question was designed to fit that shape. And so ultimately, it's still going to come down, as it always does, to the evidence. It's not enough to just say that appearances can be deceiving.
Yeah, and there's no evidence of a god at all. Evidence for a god is equivalent to evidence of unicorns. Non-existent. Actually, unicorns probably have more evidence, to be honest.
It's not enough. In other words, we still need to evaluate the fine-tuning.
David, I don't think Cameron's being dishonest. So Halnun's razor, never attribute malice to that which can be explained by stupidity. Stupid is more likely. Dishonest, less likely.
Argument and determine whether or not the premises are true. And this objection might work against some versions of the fine-tuning argument, but it doesn't say anything about mine. That appearances...
Nowhere does anything I say presuppose that your eyes should be able to see everything. That's stupid. If I could see everything, I could see the password on your computer. That's what it would entail. Like what you're saying makes no sense, as usual.
This can be deceiving. It doesn't suddenly follow that a life-permitting universe is expected or likely on naturalism. So somewhat surprisingly, this interpretation of the Puddle analogy is completely consistent with my version of the fine-tuning argument being sound. The second point here is that the appearance of design may not prove design with 100% certainty, but that was never the goal. The goal of the fine-tuning argument is to provide evidence for design, not to prove it with 100% certainty.
So if by evidence he means it's logically possible that we can imagine Sky Daddy doing it, okay, sure, but that's not real evidence. Evidence is your assumed hypothesis more likely than the others? That would be evidence. And is the Sky Daddy hypothesis, which there's no evidence for, more likely than a naturalist explanation that there is no Sky Daddy and it's just laws of physics? No. The probability of God is the same as the probability of unicorns, which is garbage, not something taken seriously. It's a joke.
If I go out into the woods and I find what looks like an arrowhead, I may not have 100% proof of design, like it still could have been produced by natural forces, but I at least have some evidence that this thing was designed.
Only because you know arrowheads have been designed by humans before. You have humans that you have literally seen make arrowheads. So the only reason that that is evidence for design is because we already have empirical evidence of arrowheads being made by people. If that you have never seen that, it would not be evidence of design. You just say, oh, look, a strange rock. For it to be evidence of design, you need to have evidence of the designer independent of the design.
Similarly, if the puddle finds itself in a transparent container with like numbers and markings on the side of it, that's not 100% proof of design, but it should nevertheless follow the evidence and conclude design.
Which is also only because you have empirical evidence that other people use those numbers and letters in that way. If you had never seen those numbers and letters in that way, then you would not have any reason to conclude it was designed. You need evidence of the designer. Like even if we had a spaceship that we just found in the middle of a field, like clearly that came from space or something, we couldn't conclude that was designed. The way we would conclude it was designed would be by analogy to humans. Oh, look, there is a seat where things can sit. Oh, look, there is a joystick. Oh, look, there is a display. Things humans use. Because we have an analogy to things humans do, that is how you would conclude design, even in the case of like spaceships or beakers or letters or whatever. Guess what? None of that exists in the universe. None of it. 0% of those. There's no analogy in the universe of human design, so there is no evidence of a designer of the universe. For there to be evidence, you would need to have an analogy to human design, like a seat, or letters, or writing, or joystick, display, those kinds of things. Analogy to human design. Just specificity is not analogous to human design. It's just specificity. Like luck. Happens all the time. Not a problem. No analogy to human design.
The third point is that we don't need to follow possibilities. We need to follow evidence.
Ravon, Church of Entropy, is a woman, I believe. I don't know what she identifies as, but woman, not a man.
Recently, I've unfortunately been dealing with a lot of health anxiety. When I get a new pain in my chest, I'm even experiencing a little right now. Sometimes my brain wants to think, oh my goodness, I have cancer. I'm about to die. Even though that's like the least likely possibility. I mean, I can entertain the possibility of cancer as long as I want and get really worked up about it, but that doesn't mean that I probably have cancer. So when Drew says that the analogy is meant to get us to consider the possibility that the universe wasn't designed for us, that is not evidence for naturalism. Considering the possibility that I have cancer does not make it likely that I have cancer. We don't need.
So the point here is that the things you count as evidence could also work for naturalism. Therefore, they're not evidence of theism. So the point Drew is making, and that the other people on this analogy are making, is that the things you're presenting aren't evidence. That's the point of the puddle analogy. Like everything you're saying would apply to the puddle who thinks it's designed when it wasn't. That means the things you're saying are not evidence. It's not meant to disprove the design hypothesis. It's meant to show that all of the things you're claiming work equally well for the alternative. So the fact that you're admitting this is just admitting that your argument is garbage, because everything you're saying could work for naturalism or theism. Therefore, it's not evidence of theism.
We need to follow possibilities. We need to follow the evidence. All right, moving on.
There is none.
So now we're on to the third interpretation of the analogy, which says that it's arrogance or kind of self-centeredness that makes us conclude design.
Yes, that is the primary reason humans have always concluded a god. Oh, look, lightning. It must be Zeus who looks like me because anthropocentric human bias. That's the whole reason for every idea of a sky daddy who created us in his image is because of human arrogance. There is zero evidence for any kind of a sky daddy. Saying that the fundamental nature resembles anything like a human mind is dumb and arrogant.
We first focus on the power of this thought, because it's actually pretty powerful. Notice that it brings in like a moral and psychological element into the whole situation. We're no longer just talking about evidence. Theists that infer design from fine-tuning aren't just wrong. They're being influenced or motivated by selfish reasons. This is
bias. I don't know if bias, like all cognitive biases, fallacies, illusions, delusions, they're all different kinds of biases. This isn't like a moral thing. It's just, you've made a very common mistake in human reasoning and you think that mistake indicates reality. It's not about morality here.
This is an excellent use of rhetoric. Excellent. It's a way of persuading people without an argument, like no argument at all.
No, that's definitely an argument. So the argument is that most times when people think Sky Daddy done it, it's because of an anthropocentric fallacy of tying in human nature to things that don't involve human nature, like the fundamental nature of reality. So it's more about you're using fallacious reasoning to think Sky Daddy because of human bias to want to imagine human-like thingy up there in Sky Daddy form, which is an argument against your position.
Notice that Adams didn't give an argument that people are motivated by narcissism or arrogance or self-centeredness. He just kind of told a story and went with it. But why can't design inferences be made with caution and humility?
Mike, thoughts on theistic evolution? Like, it's logically possible, but again, no evidence for it. It's just one of those gods of the gaps. Oh, God created everything just by poofing stuff out of the ground. Oh no, we proved that didn't work with science. We must insert new ad hoc reasoning to make God fit. God did it with theistic evolution. And then once we discover how that was created by abiogenesis, there's going to be theistic abiogenesis. And after we discover how abiogenesis happened from other natural processes, it's going to be theistic whatever that was. So God of the gaps just being pushed back eternally by science because science crushes God.
C.S. Lewis actually invented a name for this type of rhetoric. He called it Bulverism. Instead of explaining why someone is wrong, you just assume they're wrong and then explain what motivates them. Check out the...
It's the appeal to motive fallacy. Like, C.S. Lewis didn't invent this. It's been around for a much longer time. And the motive here doesn't matter. It's like we can know there is a common flaw in reasoning that most people have, which is called anthropocentric fallacy, which is where people label human type qualities into things that don't have human type qualities. Like saying, Zeus does lightning. No. So anytime you envision Sky Daddy done it, that's going to be an anthropocentric fallacy until you actually have some kind of hard evidence, not just, I can imagine the Sky Daddy done it, therefore Sky Daddy. That's just an anthropocentric fallacy. You would need some real evidence there, which you don't have. Therefore, what you're doing is an anthropocentric fallacy.
The following clip.
In other words, you must show that a man is wrong before you start explaining why he is wrong. The modern method is to assume without discussion that he is wrong, and then distract his attention from this, the only real issue, by busily explaining how he became so silly.
No, so as I just demonstrated before, you are wrong because there is no evidence of Sky Daddy. You're just asserting Sky Daddy as a possibility, assuming you're correct, and then using post hoc reasoning to say, if I assume my Sky Daddy real, then my Sky Daddy would do X. Post hoc ergo propter hoc. So you're wrong for that reason, but I know why you're doing this. The reason you're doing this is because it's an anthropocentric fallacy. You like Sky Daddy. Sky Daddy makes you happy. Therefore, you input Sky Daddy as an explanation and then try to explain him into the evidence where there isn't any. So it's not Bulverism, it's just basic reasoning. You're wrong because there's no evidence and you're just inputting Sky Daddy because fallacy.
In the course of the last 15 years, I have found this vice so common that I have had to invent a name for it. I call it Bulverism. Some day I am going to write the biography of its imaginary inventor, Ezekiel Bulver, whose destiny was determined at the age of 5 when he heard his mother say to his father, who had been maintaining that 2 sides of a triangle were together greater than the third, "Oh, you say that because you are a man." At that moment, E. Bulwer assures us, there flashed across my opening mind the great truth that refutation is no necessary part of argument. Assume that your opponent is wrong, and then explain his error, and the world will be at your feet.
Bulverism is such an effective strategy because it puts people on the defensive. We're no longer defending an argument, we're defending our own reputation. From a rhetorical standpoint, this is great stuff. But from a dialectical standpoint, it's garbage. Explaining why someone is motivated to hold design or infer design doesn't say anything about the truth or falsity of their arguments. Even if someone is arrogant or self-centered, it doesn't suddenly follow that a life-permitting universe is now likely or expected on naturalism. This objection is actually just a red herring. It's like a clever distraction from the actual issue, from the fine-tuning argument. Atheists that are watching this, don't take the bait. Don't take it. Shift the focus back to the argument. Here's a question you can ask when you find yourself in this situation.
Ooh, question.
Now look, I understand that you think design inferences are sort of influenced by self-centeredness. I get that. But let's shelf it for a moment and let's get back to the argument. Like, which premise in my argument is false, and then explain why.
Both 1 and 2, as I did it earlier. They're both false. The premise 1 is false is because you're comparing all kinds of flowers to one kind of trees, which is an unfair comparison. To make a fair comparison, you need to compare all kinds of flowers to all kinds of trees. In this analogy, clearly, like if you say the sakura tree is more likely to have pink flowers than all kinds of flowers, or more pink petals. So the sakura tree is more likely to have pink petals than any kind of flowers. But obviously that's the case. The question is, well, what if we compare all kinds of trees to all kinds of flowers? Or what if we compare a specific kind of flower to a specific kind of tree? Then you get a fair comparison. Saying all kinds of naturalism is less likely to produce a life-permitting universe than your sacred sky daddy, because you assume you have a sacred sky daddy with the particular nature to create a life-permitting universe, is an unfair comparison, just like comparing one kind of tree to all kinds of flowers. To make a fair comparison, you would compare one kind of naturalism, which has a particular nature to create life-permitting universes, like, for example, one that has a law that intertwines all the known laws of physics to make them all necessary, to your particular sky daddy. And then you get the same probabilities. So your premise 1 is false because nature, naturalism, could have a law that makes all the laws interdetermined so that a life-permitting universe is actually really likely. So it isn't wrong to say that under naturalism, a life-permitting universe is very, very low. And your second premise is that it's not low under a God hypothesis is also wrong, because guess what? There's infinitely many types of gods. For any kind of a universe, there could be a kind of a God who would want that kind of a universe. So the probability of a God creating a life-permitting universe is exactly the same as the universe being life-permitting for any reason under naturalism. Because guess what? There's a 1-to-1 correlation. For every kind of universe, there is a kind of God who would want that kind of universe. So the probabilities are the same. So premise 1 is false, premise 2 is false. Both of them are false.
To the atheists watching that use this kind of strategy, like just assuming that theists are wrong and then going the route of explaining their motives is not a long-term strategy. It's called Bulverism. At some point, you're still going to need to interact with the arguments. So eventually.
Like, you mean like what most atheists do? The reason atheism is popular, the reason we're rational skeptics, because we actually address the arguments and show that your position is silly and make fun of you for it? Like, that's kind of what we do. Try asking atheists to actually address your argument is like asking me to drink soda. Like, we already do this. This is the thing. This is our job. Like, what are you doing?
Eventually, you're going to have to do that. Oh, and by that, I don't mean like interact with the weakest possible versions of the arguments. I mean like interact with the strongest ones.
Mike, do you think the God of the Bible holds the same properties as the pantheistic gods? It depends. Like, you can say the God of the Bible is nature. That's a possible interpretation. My view of naturalistic pantheism is that there's no consciousness involved. So it's eternal, all-powerful nature with no mind. So it would not fit the definition of God. That's my view of naturalistic pantheism.
Ones that are in the literature, defended by professional philosophers, that kind of thing. Don't rely on Wikipedia. All right, so let's move on. The fourth interpretation.
Wikipedia is fine. Wikipedia is extremely accurate. It's more accurate than most of the sources. Totally fine to use Wikipedia, like, especially since it lists all of the academic sources that it uses. Like, Wikipedia is fine. Like, Christians like to discount Wikipedia because Wikipedia just dumps on them because it goes with the consensus view, which says theism is dumb. Because it is.
Is that just like a differently shaped puddle would form in a differently shaped hole, different life would form in a different universe with different conditions. We just happen to find ourselves in a universe where our kind of life emerged.
Sure.
The benefit of this interpretation is that finally we're taking aim at the argument. If this objection works, it would mean that life is not so unlikely, not so unexpected on naturalism. But the problem is that this is just a complete misunderstanding of fine-tuning. Universes with slightly different conditions can't support life at all. Removing gravity doesn't make it the case that different life...
It's wrong. As I explained earlier, like any kind of force, if you change gravity and you replaced it with a different force, imagine there's a different force there that we don't know about that is 40 orders of magnitude weaker than gravity. So if you change gravity, and any change to gravity will cause this other force to fill the gap based on however much amount you change it. Well, then guess what? Any amount you change gravity will have no effect because it's just going to be replaced by this other force, either weakening or strengthening. So assuming there is no other forces that we don't know about, and then changing gravity would have the ability to make a non-life universe. But guess what? We don't know what other forces are or aren't there. And so you can't say it's very low under naturalism. But you're right. There's no evidence of this other force. We don't have any evidence that the other force is there yet. But guess what? There's no evidence of a God either. None. Zero. So imagining a made-up Sky Daddy property and then saying the made-up Sky Daddy property is a relevant factor in determining the probability of the made-up Sky Daddy in making our universe. Well, guess what? We can apply the made-up property methodology to ours too, make up a property in the universe, like this new law of physics of gravity, that replaces the gravity that has changed anyway, our known laws, if you change them. Well, then guess what? You get the same probabilities. If you can make shit up, so can we. Doesn't actually help your argument.
Life would emerge, it makes it impossible for life to emerge. Stars, galaxies, and planets would never form. The chemistry needed for evolution could never emerge. Life can't exist where fundamental particles don't stick together.
Thank you for the donation, Cosmic. Appreciate it. I don't have the... I get it. My, what's it? I need to add in... I don't know what it is, though. Let's go to response vid. Alert box is a bell icon. The bell icon. Right. Full screen YouTube. Add. I don't know what the bell icon is. Damn. Alert box right there. Add source. Add source. There we go. Now I'll see the super chats. All right, cool. Put them right over Cameron's face. Do a super chat, somebody. We'll see it or pop over Cameron's face. It'll be funny.
And this is where this interpretation of the puddle analogy just completely breaks down. And that's fine. Like, analogies all break down at some point. Changing the shape of the container might change the shape of the puddle, but changing the conditions of the universe doesn't just change the shape of life. It makes life impossible. Life can't...
No, it doesn't. Again, there could be other laws. Any law you change, there could be a second law there to balance out the change. It changes proportionally. So if you imagine changing gravity and making it stronger, there could be this other force that goes in the opposite direction to make the connection between things weaker. And then poof, it like pushes stuff apart, essentially. And guess what? You have exactly the same result. So no, changing gravity doesn't make life impossible, because there's lots of things about naturalism we don't know yet. We don't know all the laws of physics. So comparing again, all possible kinds of universes to one possible kind of God, not an accurate comparison.
Can't exist in a universe with nothing but black holes. Life can't exist where neighboring particles are trillions of light years away. So this interpretation...
Life can't exist in a universe that wants... A universe made by a God who only wants black holes, or a universe made by a God who only wants every particle to be trillions of light years away. Every possible kind of a universe has a corollary kind of a God who would want that kind of a universe. TJump, will you be debating any theists anytime soon? I don't know. Maybe. I think I have a few set up. I don't remember, though. I'd have to check.
Of the puddle analogy fails to appreciate the...
Is my freaking alert box not working? Do I need to set it up differently? Should be working. I don't know. Test widgets. Well, I mean, it's showing up. Those are fake donations, by the way. John is not a real person. Just me clicking the test button. Done. There we go. Got it. Cosmic showed up. Good. There we go. Now it's working. I'll do bigger. Box. Bigger. All right. Good.
The severity of fine-tuning. The first premise of my argument is therefore on pretty solid grounds. For a more
Nope. I debunked that so many times. Nope.
in-depth look at the evidence for fine-tuning the stuff I've been talking about, check the link in the description where I talked with an actual cosmologist, Dr. Luke Barnes, about it. So again, description. All right, so now we're on the last
check my
interpretation
videos
of the analogy.
I actually talked with him and Robin Collins, and they say no. Nope.
The fifth interpretation, which says that life is necessary. Just like the puddle can only observe the shape that it takes, life can only observe a life-permitting universe. If the universe couldn't permit life, then obviously we wouldn't be here wondering why it permits life. Like the previous interpretation, this one actually targets the argument, targets the first premise. Life is not so unexpected on naturalism because life has to exist. Now, it may surprise you to learn this, but this objection actually has a name, and it was answered about 3 decades ago. In 1989, a Canadian philosopher by the name of John Leslie wrote this amazing book, which is still worth reading today, called Universes, where he gives an analogy in order to explain why this reasoning breaks down. And by the way, his analogy doesn't entail that people that disagree with it are arrogant and self-centered, so at least it has that going for it. So here's astronomer Deborah Harasma, hopefully that's the way you pronounce that. Here's her explaining what the firing squad analogy is.
John Leslie has suggested this analogy. Say there's a criminal who's up to be executed, and he stands before a firing squad. Firing squad has a dozen members. They all are sharpshooters. They all have their guns pointed right at his head. The commandant says fire. They all fire, and the accused walks away free. And for some reason, he's not killed. Well, is he going to say, well, of course I wasn't killed. I'm here, and if I was killed, I wouldn't be here to wonder about it. No, he's going to want to know why. What happened? Were there no bullets? What was going on? You still need an explanation. The weak anthropic principle doesn't really explain why the universe is the way it is. So there's still something further to explain there.
So here's another way of understanding Leslie's response. That A entails B doesn't mean that A explains B. For example,
Sky Daddy with made-up property entails universe. Doesn't mean that Sky Daddy explains the universe. Would that one work? I think that one works. That one works really well.
My observing a broken window might entail that a window is broken, but that doesn't explain why the window is broken. Similarly, our observing a
Thanks for the donation, Best Bob. Let's see if it shows up. Hopefully it will.
life-permitting universe might entail that a life-permitting universe exists, but that doesn't explain why a life-permitting universe exists. Atheists might still worry here.
Got it. Nice. Now it's bigger and it covers up Cameron's face. Beautiful. Beautiful. So if anyone wants Cameron's face covered, do a super chat. It'll cover up Cameron's face.
That this analogy doesn't work because it assumes that other possibilities are actually possible. It's possible, for example, that instead of missing, the firing squad actually shot the guy. But for all we know, the universe had to absolutely be this way. It's necessary that it's this way. Maybe it's not even possible that the universe was different, which would mean that the objective probability of giving a life-permitting universe is 1 out of 1. Here is a major, major problem with this view. It renders design inferences about the world, really obvious ones, it renders them impossible. For example, suppose that Curiosity, the NASA rover currently on Mars, was going around, looking around, and in one of the caves, it found a fully functioning Ferrari. I think pretty much everyone would conclude that the Ferrari was designed. It was put there by somebody. But if this is the only possible universe, then actually the objective probability that that Ferrari sitting in that cave is 1 out of 1. This is actually a really serious problem.
No, this is not a serious problem. This is just a dumb theistic rhetoric trick. So if there was a Ferrari in a cave, we would be justified in concluding it was designed because we've seen Ferraris designed by humans. So because we have lots and lots of evidence of humans designing stuff, it would be reasonable to assume any Ferrari we found was designed by humans because it's something humans designed here on Earth that we can find. The fact that it's quantum mechanically possible that a Ferrari would just pop out of existence is possible for sure. And so if we did conclude design for a Ferrari that popped into existence by quantum mechanics, we'd be wrong. So it's perfectly fine to say, yeah, it's possible that a Ferrari would pop into existence, but we would be reasonable in concluding it was designed. But guess what? The universe doesn't work this way. We don't have any evidence of a universe designer. We don't have any evidence of anything analogous in the universe to human design. So it's never reasonable to conclude the universe was designed in the first place. Unlike a Ferrari, it's reasonable to conclude Ferrari was designed because we've seen it designed by humans. It's never reasonable to conclude the universe was designed. This is not a problem at all. This is like, what? No.
Just for design inferences, but about probability more generally. Here's Dr. Luke Barnes explaining all the problems with this thinking.
Yeah, you do hear this. Some people say, probabilities are, I observe one universe, and out of that one universe, one is life permitting, so the probability is 1 out of 1. And I mean, there had better be a better idea about probability than that, or science is in big trouble. Because every theory, imagine there's some data that's turned up, and that you've got like 5 theories, and you go, all right, what do you reckon? And all 5 of them go, well, look, there's one universe, and that's the data in that universe. So the probability of that data is 1 out of 1. My theory is fine. The probability is 100%. And then the next guy says the same, and then the next person says, and all 5. Like, there'd better be something else that we can say about probabilities other than I observed one thing, and so the probability is 1 out of 1. Like, if that's true, we can't use probability for anything.
Luke's point here is that if you want to say that the probability of getting a life-permitting universe is 1 out of 1, then be ready to throw science and reason and probability, be ready to throw it away.
That would only apply if you assumed everything that happened had a probability of 1 out of 1, not just that life did. So if it only applies to life, you can just say there is a particular property in the universe, like a law that makes life necessary, and say that is going to be in every possible universe, or an ultimate unnecessary sky daddy who must create life. You can insert any made-up property to explain any one variable without getting rid of science. That's just false. It's just a explosion principle claim that if there's one contradiction, well, then everything is a contradiction. Like, no, it's not how it works. You can say life has a 1-to-1 probability without claiming that everything does. Necessarianism does not necessarily follow from this claim. It's not a problem at all. It's not really relevant to the arguments. The problem with theism is that, again, you've just made up a sky daddy with a made-up property to explain why we see the universe. Guess what? We can just make up a property to see the universe in itself creating life-permitting things without a god, and the probability would be the same. Not a problem here. Where's my chat thingy? God can make life in any condition. His argument is dumb. Yes, exactly, Gabriel. Why would God be limited to the laws of nature? Exactly. So God could create a life-permitting universe without the laws of physics. So even if there is a God, he wouldn't have needed to design anything anyway. So saying that he designed the universe to create life is completely redundant and pointless.
Don't use it anymore. In summary, we looked at 5...
That was beautiful. Exactly. The God analogy is pointless. Don't use it anymore. Love it. Thank you, Cameron. Very helpful.
5 interpretations of the puddle analogy. The first interpretation says that the idea of design can make us care less about the environment. In response, I agreed that it can, but argued that it shouldn't. The Bible makes it clear that we are going to be held accountable for our stewardship of the world.
Blah, blah, blah.
I also pointed out that this objection is irrelevant to my argument from fine-tuning. The second interpretation says that appearances can be deceiving.
Yeah.
And there I argued 3 different things. First, the fallibility of design inferences doesn't interact with my argument and hence can't tell us whether the universe is designed or not. Second, the fine-tuning argument doesn't seek to prove design, it seeks to provide evidence for design. And third, we don't need to follow possibilities, we need to follow evidence. The third interpretation is that thinking the world was created especially for us is self-centered. In response, I explained how this engages in what C.S. Lewis called Bulverism. Assume your interlocutor is wrong and then explain what motivates them. This is rhetorically effective but fails dialectically. It doesn't say anything about the validity of the fine-tuning argument. The fourth interpretation of the puddle analogy says that different universes might produce different life. In response to this, I said that this misunderstands what physicists mean by fine-tuning. Life can't emerge in a universe full of nothing but black holes. The fifth interpretation says that life is necessary. In response to this, we heard John Leslie's firing squad analogy, saw that just because A entails B doesn't mean that A explains B, and then saw that the thinking behind this objection would actually destroy all probabilistic reasoning. All in all, the puddle analogy fails no matter which way you look at it.
All right, so essentially that's the end of the video, and Cameron just doesn't understand the puddle analogy. So the whole point of the puddle analogy is that all of the reasoning you theists are using would apply to the puddle in the puddle case and be wrong in the puddle case, so you're just like the puddle. You think us designed, because you can imagine it the case. It seems very nice that all these criteria seem perfectly fit for us, isn't evidence that it's actually designed. It's just a set of data. In order for it to be evidence of design, you need evidence of the designer independent of the object. You don't have that. For the reasons I listed, your premise 1 and premise 2 are just objectively false because you're comparing all kinds of flowers to one kind of trees and assuming that that's a fair comparison when it's clearly not. Just like there's no evidence of a God, there also is no evidence of a law guiding the laws of physics. But guess what? We do have evidence that the natural universe is a thing, whereas we have no evidence of any kind of God being a thing. So the natural universe hypothesis, like the multiverse, is infinitely better than made-up Sky Daddy. But if you want to say that because made-up Sky Daddy has some property to make a life-prone universe more likely than just random forces in nature, guess what? We can do the same thing. Made-up law, just insert that into nature, and now we get the same probability. Making stuff up and asserting it isn't evidence. That's the point of the puddle analogy. You making stuff up based on your feelings of the probability isn't evidence. It's the same with the specified complexity argument. Just seeing some improbable thing isn't evidence of design. As I showed in my conversation with Robin Collins, no, this isn't evidence of design. You would need to substantiate that other part of God's nature, the morality. If you could show that the moral nature was a real thing that was objectively real, independent of this fine-tuned argument, then that would work. So if you had evidence of the designer, and evidence the designer had this moral thing, and that existed before looking at the fine-tuning argument, then the fine-tuning argument would be evidence. But without any of that other independent evidence, like God existing and being moral, you got nothing. Nothing in physics indicates design. It's just you hypothesizing stuff, like the puddle, hypothesizing stuff based on a feeling and nothing else. So that's Cameron misunderstanding the puddle analogy. Cameron debunked, and the fine-tuning argument debunked. All right, cool. Thanks, guys. That was cool. I don't know. Should I do like one of those call-in thingies, like Pine Creek, call into the show? I could probably do that. Let's see, put a whereby thingy. Live stream. Thank you, Gabriel. Let's see. Wow, shut up. All right. Whereby.com/TJump. Join if you want to hang out. I'll just put a thing on the screen. I can probably just move that over. Can you guys still hear me? Yeah, you guys can still hear me here. I don't know if I can be heard on that one or not. Let's go. Cool text generator. Cool text generator. If anyone wants to hang out and chat, join whereby.com/TJump. You can just hop in and do a Pine Creek thingy. We're going to do Discord too. Thanks, Don. Shout out to Don Fullman from the Skeptics of Middle Georgia for sponsoring the channel. Great guy. Check out the Skeptics of Middle Georgia. Hopefully he'll set up another live event thingy soon, as long as we don't get shut down again by Delta COVID. Save images. Desktop. Save. Close. Add image. Source. Whereby link. Add source. Browse. Open. Done. This thingy down here. There's the join link if anyone wants to hop in and chat. That's cool. Or go to the Discord. Discord will work too. Discord. What time is it? It's 4:30. Discord. Testing. Testing. Yeah, still working here. Freeze that. Hi. All right. I'll set this up for later. Try and do a live stream. I'll try to start doing the call-in show thingy like Doug does, but I'll just have to pull up Discord first. That'll be a good idea. Set it up in the Q&A chat. All right, guys, that was it for the video. I will see you guys later and set